Hey, I'm Yogi Don, your octogenarian yogi. In these videos, I'll share what I've learned over the years about yoga's ethics, its philosophy, its poses, its breath work, and meditation. May we be protected together, may we be nourished together, may we create strength together, may our work together bring fulfillment, and may there be no disharmonies among us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. This includes a collection of photos from 1993, 2011, and 2016. Expectations. When you're traveling in a culture that's unfamiliar as India's, you see things that you don't really understand. We were driving in the southwestern state of Kerala. It was 1993. We were out in the country when we realized that there were several working elephants that were walking up the side of the road behind us. This is what I expected India to be, elephants everywhere. Anyway, we stopped to take some pictures. Later we were driving through Mundabalai National Park, hoping that we'd see some tigers, but instead we did see some wild elephants with a calf. On another trip to India, I visited Jaipur's Ambur Fort, where they had several working elephants that took tourists on rides. My guide encouraged me to take the ride because he said in a year or two they probably wouldn't allow him anymore for humanitarian reasons. I debated with myself, but I took the ride. The last time I checked, they still have a limited number of rides that an elephant can do every day. It was later that I was reading more about the elephants in Kerala, and I learned that there were camps around in the area where we were where they trained the elephants. And then I looked back some of the early pictures that I had taken from that trip, and I realized that what we saw were really elephants in training. They had these chains around, which you can see in the photos, chains around their ankles and around their bodies that helped to keep them under control. Anyway, it sort of gave me pause to stop and think about what we see and what we think we see and what we expect to see when we're traveling. A new perspective. It was 1993. We were in the southwestern Indian city of Cochin on the Arabian Sea. We'd heard about an outdoor performance of a dance called Kathakali. It was supposed to begin at sunset, but if you got there an hour or so early, you could watch the performers do their makeup. It turned out to be a couple of blocks from the Arabian Sea on the roof of a residence. My expectations weren't very high. We watched the performers apply their makeup for a while before a man dressed in white came out and began to tell us what was going on and what we were going to see. We were going to see an episode from the Ramayana. My memory is that he sort of veered off the subject to tell us about Hinduism. I think he said something like, I can tell you what Hinduism's all about in a minute. And then he said, no, maybe 30 seconds. And he said something like this: everybody thinks that Hindus believe in many gods. Hindus believe there is one God, he said, but that God manifests in many ways. It's the artist's job to show what we can't really describe with words. Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything begins, grows, and dies. In Hinduism, artists depict the beginning, creation, with Brahma, the middle with Vishnu, the sustainer, and the end, Shiva, death, destruction. For me, it was a mind-blowing concept that the Hindu gods and goddesses could be thought of as a metaphor. Kolams, a folk art. In South India, every morning, the woman of the house takes some rice flour and goes out to the front step and or just in front of the front door and draws a complicated design called a kolam on the threshold. And the purpose of this is that people who come in will walk over the kolam and that the design will catch evil spirits and keep them out of the house. I guess you'd call it one of those a folk art practice. Anyway, the whole idea is, like I said, to capture the spirits as you walk into the house, so that you keep the evil spirits, evilness out of the house. And then they're obliterated through the day, and the next morning she's out there washing the step and putting out a new kolam. But on another trip to India, I was in the same area in Chennai, and they had what seemed to be a kolam festival or a kolam competition of some sort. In Pondicherry, there was a celebration called Pongal, and they had some pretty fancy kolams that were drawn on steps in the front of the houses, and some of them were marked off with stones to show that you weren't supposed to step on them because they were for show. But anyway, it's kind of a neat practice, and one that you don't often see, and probably one that at some point will die out as people become more and more westernized in the way that they live. On the road. Don't, under any circumstances, drive in India. It's way too crazy. There are rules of the road, but no one follows them. One taxi driver that I spoke to told me that in America we have roads that are way too wide. In India, they try and pack as many cars into a small space as they can. I think that the basic rule of the road in India is what I call beep and go. As soon as a driver honks his horn, he's presumed to take responsibility for himself and will stay out of the way of everybody else on the road. In theory, driving is to the left, but actually anything goes, including driving on the wrong side of the road in the wrong direction. That's happened to me several times. But you do honk when you pass another vehicle. At all blind corners, you honk. At intersections, curves, hills. You honk for animals 2- and 4-legged. Another rule is that small always gives way to large, except when it comes to animals, which all have primacy over everything else. I mean, they rule. And by all means, do not hit a cow. If you do, you are in big, serious trouble. There aren't any good Samaritan laws in India. If you stop to help, the police assume that you were part of the problem, that you created the problem, that you're responsible. Otherwise, why would you stop? Nobody does in India. In fact, one night on the way to a restaurant, we saw a man who had been hit, and he was lying out in the middle of the street trying to get help. It looked like maybe his pelvis was crushed because he couldn't get up, and he was sort of bent at an odd angle. We wanted to stop, but we're told if you do, the police come, which they will, you're going to be in trouble because they'll assume that you caused the accident. So we went on and we called from the restaurant to get some help for the man. When we came back, of course, he was gone. So we presume that he did eventually get the help that he needed. I also remember in Pondicherry, I was coming back into the city from Oroville and a visit to the meditation center there. And a taxi had hit a woman in a crowded part of the edge of the city. Hit a woman, knocked her down, and there were 2 very blonde, probably Northern European young women in the cab, and I think they were foolish to have gotten out and start to offer assistance, and our cab driver, or my cab driver, kept on going, and I think that was the smart thing to do. But I've always wondered about those women and how they made out, because there are instances where crowds have gotten angry over accidents like that and taken it into their own hands to wreak revenge on a person or people that they think are responsible. So it's not a great idea. Gurus, true and false. When I was in India at the ashram in Rishikesh, that would be 2011, Swamiji told a story about Americans who went to a temple in the Himalayan mountains, and they got to know this person at the temple, and they presumed that he was a priest. They thought he was so great that they sponsored him to come back to America and do tours and give lectures. But according to Swamiji, the man was actually the caretaker at the temple and had no special training at all in religion or anything else. It's just what he had picked up over the course of his lifetime. First time I was in South India, there were posters and signs all over the place for someone called Sai Baba. I asked who Sai Baba was and learned that he was the current Sai Baba was presumed to be a reincarnation of the previous Sai Baba who had died in, I think, 1918. Actually, this current Sai Baba looked a lot like a combination of Richard Simmons and Jimi Hendrix. He had all the energy of Richard Simmons. If you remember him from back in the 80s, 90s. He used to have a TV show on exercise or something like that. And Jimi Hendrix with his big fluffy afro hairdo. Anyway, toward the end of one 3-month stay in India, I noticed on the grocery store where I had been shopping, there was a motto, love all, serve all. And I later checked out and found that this was the current Sai Baba's, one of his sayings. I've also seen it as love all, serve all, help ever, hurt never. And I don't know if Sai Baba is the real deal or not, but at least his message sounds good. I like that. Ramana Maharshi, on the other hand, is really the real deal. He was a saint in South India, not far from Pondicherry. He lived near Mount Arunachala. He became enlightened as a teenager and left home, went to Mount Arunachala, and lived in caves for a long time before he finally took up residence in a nearby temple where he lived most of his life, I think. Anyway, he was the real deal. Wasn't out to make a name for himself. He wasn't out to gather followers. He wasn't trying to make money. He was just trying to help other people. Wrote books, gave lectures, and otherwise pretty much stayed at the temple where he was living. So that's Ramana Maharshi, a saint in South India, lived in around the mountain at Arunachala. The mountain is considered a holy mountain, and there's a path you can walk around the mountain. At the time I was just recovering from being sick, and so I circumambulated the mountain in a taxi. So the long and short of it is, there are some important people in India who are real saints, and there are others who are wannabes, and there are others who are out simply to make money and accumulate as many followers as they can accumulate. There you have it. May our bodies be strong, relaxed, and healthy. May our minds be calm, clear, and serene. May our hearts be filled with loving kindness, and may we live our lives in harmony with our true inner selves. May we be friendly toward the joyful, compassionate toward the suffering. May we celebrate the good in others and remain impartial to their faults and imperfections. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Our hands in prayer at our hearts, we bow to each other. Namaste. Thank you for being here. I hope you'll subscribe and share these videos.